and we welcome you guys to Quarantine Chats episode 50. We are joined here by a very special guest here, Ryan Abram. He has covered USC football for over 20 years. He is the lead journalist at uscfootball.com, and I will have my special guest, Isaiah Young, introduce him. Thank you, Isaiah, for getting him on the show.
Yeah, no problem. This is an interview that I've been looking forward to quite some time. You guys all know that I'm a huge fan of Kedon Slovis. I watch a lot of USC football games, and what got me to go after Ryan is I saw his pre-game and post-game shows on his Peristyle podcast with Shotgun, Spratling, and Keeley, and they do a fantastic job. And I watch it every Saturdays. They go over what USC did right, what USC did wrong, and the reactions from the fans and stuff like that. So they do a great job. Really recommend you guys all to check it out. But yeah, as Steven said, Ryan has covered USC football for over 20 plus years. I'm so honored to have him on the show. Ryan, thanks for coming on. And how's life in Southern California going?
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's going pretty good. I mean, we were really hopeful that there was going to be a college football season. Then it's sort of I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's as likely at this point, but just trying to stay safe out there. I love being outside, I'm trying to golf, go play beach volleyball, just do things kind of away from other people and keep being hopeful that we're going to get college football this fall.
Yeah, man. We are as well. We are huge diehard college football fans, and that actually ties into our first topic, which is, what was your reaction to the Pac-12 announcing that it has canceled all non-conference football games for this upcoming season and will go to a conference-only schedule?
Yeah, I think once we heard from the Big Ten, and it was a bit of a surprise that they did it as early as they did. We know the SEC, which drives college football, wanted to wait as long as possible, and we felt like the Power Five conferences might have been in cahoots a little bit. It seemed like there was a lot of communication going on. We don't really have a college football czar. There's no one running college football, so a lot of that power base is at the conference level. I've really felt that all the conferences would kind of come together in the Power Five and make a decision together. The Big Ten is pretty much knocking that first domino down. Once the Big Ten canceled their non-conference schedule, I just didn't feel like there's any way the rest of college football could follow along. So I think with the Pac-12, they've kind of been more of a following conference, but they followed pretty quickly. Within a couple of days, they announced that the conference schedule was wiped out. And there's still some question there. I mean, both Stanford and USC played Notre Dame. Could Notre Dame be included in that? Will they go to a 10 conference schedule? Because right now all the schools have 9 games on their schedule, but there's a mix. There's some schools that have 4 road games, some that have 4 home games, and the other have 5 of the opposite of that. So there's still a lot of things to be worked out. We should know by the end of the month what they're going to do with the schedule, but not a huge surprise. The big surprise really was the Big Ten doing it first. But once that happened, it's going to be really hard for the SEC to keep going with their schedules, or the ACC, when you have other Power Five conferences dropping out and you're losing some of those games. And some of the games the SEC likes to schedule, the group of 5 teams or FCS schools, they're not going to be able to test players as well as the Power Five schools can. So to me, it's more about consolidating some of the power, having more control, having more flexibility at the conference level. And then that gives you the best opportunity to have as much of a college football season as you possibly can, as early as you can. Hopefully it's this fall. Maybe they delay it a month or 2. Maybe they have to delay it to the spring. But you don't want to see it canceled altogether. But they would like to get something in the fall. And the best chance of that would be conference games only.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Ryan. And, that takes me to my second question, and that is, do you believe that we will ultimately have a college football season this fall? When I first heard the news that the conferences were all going to conference-only games, I thought, this is the beginning of the end on the 2020 season. I thought that there would be more things to come. But what is your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I keep going back and forth, guys. I felt like earlier on, they're going to do something. Now, if you are a big fan, like we wanted to see college football happening, the factors in your favor, even though things are trending in the wrong direction, are that all of these college athletic departments rely on football. They need football one way or another. I know that, if you're on the water polo team, people don't want to hear that, but without the money that football generates, those other sports wouldn't exist. We saw Stanford cut 11 Division I sports is crazy. They had the most, I think, in the country, but I don't think other athletic departments are going to be able to survive without football. Now, you don't want to do it where it's unsafe for student athletes. You don't want to take unnecessary risks, but you could argue a lot of the student athletes are better off being on campus with their fellow teammates in a controlled environment than they would be randomly in their homes across the country. It's hard to say, but I feel like it's such an important part of the athletic department's budgets. They're going to put as many resources into doing this as possible. Like whatever they need to make football happen, they're going to try to do it. So unless there's just no way possible, I feel like there's still a chance. The numbers aren't going in the right direction. Things aren't trending that way. Football is not a socially distant sport. I mean, they're having enough trouble with golf. The NBA is going to be in a bubble. You can't be in a bubble for college football. The NFL is going to have a hard time with 53-man rosters that are professional athletes. These are college students that have to go along with their college lives as well. And 100 people on a team playing across different states and all this stuff. I mean, there's a lot of complexities there, but I kind of am holding out hope that they're going to be some semblance of a season, maybe start in October, maybe conference game only, 8 or 10 games, and they figure out a way to make it happen. And I think the key things, guys, is going to be the flexibility. Think about sports. Is there a more inflexible sport than college football? I mean, they schedule out, games 10 years in advance. They can't change anything. You might see this year conference commissioners going, all right, well, Cal got a whole bunch of sick guys on their team. We're going to move that game against Oregon State to week 7. And well, we're actually going to have Oregon State play Washington State twice this year. They're close by. You might see things like that happening, like the ultimate flexibility just to make the season happen. So I'm curious to see what transpires, but I feel like there's enough flexibility there with the conference schedule only. There's a decent chance we're actually going to have football.
Yeah, that's great to see. Yeah, go ahead, Steven.
Yeah, and Ryan, you mentioned that football is really the blue blood of college sports for so many universities out there. I mean, you talk about Stanford, who had to cut 11 athletic programs. That is not an easy decision to make. But the question now is, if we have that college football season, we've already seen all these non-conference games being cut out because they want to limit travel. So under these given circumstances, how will the college football playoffs be played out? And if we don't have a college football playoffs, will we still crown a champion?
Yeah, and I think that's when you're talking about flexibility, you're going to have to be flexible if you're the college football playoff committee. I think this is a perfect opportunity to have an expanded playoff where you say, okay, the Power 5 conferences, each are going to you go off, do your thing, and determine your champion. The Pac-12, if you want to just draw names out of a hat and pick a champion, that's fine. We want your champion. Big Ten, we want your champion. We're going to bring them all together, and then the committee can pick 3 other teams, or maybe you just do 6 and there's like a, seating and you have, 2 buys or something like that. But let the committee go out and pick 1 other team or 3 other teams, and you include 6 or 8 teams and go with it that way. Again, being flexible. And I don't think the television partners would matter much. You're going to get more important college games out there because there's a big hit with just, losing some of those games. I mean, just think canceling the conference games, you lose USC, Alabama, USC, Notre Dame, Oregon and Ohio State, Michigan and Washington, Wisconsin. I mean, Notre Dame and Wisconsin. I mean, it's crazy some of the stuff that you're missing out on. So if there's an opportunity to have more playoff games, I think the television partners would be on board with that. So again, it's about flexibility. But once you split off into conferences and conferences are only, then you need some way to bring them all together. And I think that's where the playoff committee could come in and expand what they're doing right now.
Yeah, and I think that is a really good point to be made. If we have an expanded playoffs, maybe you could even have some teams from, the less powerful conferences like a Boise State or UCF sneak in. That would be really exciting. So if we have this, college football playoffs and it is extended, do you envision it kind of playing out like the NBA playoffs where all the teams kind of meet up in a centralized location and knock out those playoff matchups?
Wow, that's interesting. I think it would take so long to get something like that happening. Just doing it for the NBA, trying to get everyone to the bubble, it's been a logistical nightmare. I don't know if you could go to that level to try to quarantine. It would be like over 1,000 people because of, you have 8 college football teams. But it might have to be a home situation, like home games, and maybe have the finals somewhere else. But just going to a neutral site, I think it adds a lot of complexities. If you have one team traveling someplace, that's this difficult. And if you have two teams traveling, I think it makes it this much more difficult. So I don't know if they could do that. That's a lot to pull together unless the playoffs are going to be like months later, because it's taken the NBA a while to get it, and we still haven't seen any games there yet.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough situation to manage. I want to go over to Isaiah. Isaiah, you had something to add to the discussion.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I agree with Ryan 100% that I believe that this is the perfect time to integrate a 8-team playoff. I told someone else this earlier that with this weird year that we're having, and you have team baseball trying out this new rules, and the NBA also trying out some expanded playoff play-in tournament stuff, some stuff like that. They've been talking about for quite a while. I just think, like we've been talking about this 8-team playoff for a while, and if there's a year that you can integrate it in, it's going to be this year. Because if you don't integrate it this year, I don't know when would be the perfect time to integrate it once everything comes back to normal.
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's shift over to Trevor, who has a question about kind of where USC has gone since, some of the glory days with guys like Pete Carroll and Sam Darnold even as of late.
So my question is, what will USC have to do to reach back to its glory days and status of being like that Power 5 school that's in the national championship game or competing in those high, exciting Rose Bowl victories over Big Ten opponents?
Yeah, Trevor, it's a great question because that's what most USC fans want to know. Where's it going? And to me, college football is so much about coaching. Obviously, players play an integral part of that. But coaches have to recruit 365 days a year. You have to be recruiting at a very high level. USC is a program that's done that historically, although the last 2 recruiting classes are the worst I've ever seen covering the team. And, last year it might've been the worst ever. They've bounced back. They've hired some much better assistant coaches like a Dante Williams out of from Oregon, who's from Southern California. Craig Nivar's been really good coming over from Texas. I think having those relentless recruiters that live and die every day. They're texting somebody, they're calling somebody, they're talking to prospects, and they've had to shift during this coronavirus quarantine because you can't have visitors on campus. You can't go out and evaluate. So I think they've done a really good job during this pandemic to go out and figure out ways to recruit and do that. So I think you can do that at USC as long as you're competent. And I think USC had some kind of part-time recruiters on the last couple of staffs, and that's the fault of Clay Helton. Clay Helton can't let that happen. Now he's replaced those guys and they're recruiting at a much higher level. But to me, it's really about coaching. You bring those players in, but you got to develop them as well. You want you bring a few 3-stars in, you want to be able to turn them into first, second, third round draft picks if you can. Like Uchenna Nwosu did that a few years ago coming in. He was like a 3-star safety out of Narbonne High School and ends up being, I think it was a second round draft pick linebacker. USC lately, it's more been like they got 5-stars coming in and they kind of leave at that same level and get drafted wherever they would be. They need to really show that they can develop those players and obviously win at a high level. Losing, that you mentioned the Rose Bowl season with Sam Darnold. They still lost 3 games that year. It's really tough to be successful in college football if you're going to lose multiple games, 3, 4, 5 games a year. I don't think that can happen. So this was supposed to be like a prove it year for Clay Helton, where he's going to take a really good roster, a proven offensive system, a stud and Kedon Slovis and a whole bunch of good wide receivers, and play a tough schedule with Alabama and at Oregon and Notre Dame. Now most of those games, the big games are gone. I don't know what this really proves, but it's really, to me, Trevor, more about getting that elite level coaching. And Clay Helton has not been an elite coach so far, but he's been around a while and he's learned on the job. So if you want to have that success with Clay Helton as a head coach, he'd have to show this year, and maybe this will be an opportunity for him to keep growing, that he can take that next step, hire a good, competent staff, and take this team to another level. If not, then they probably have to go in another direction, and you bring in somebody that's been a proven elite winner. And Clay Helton has never been a head coach before. USC took a chance on him. So far, they have a Rose Bowl win, which is nice, but in the 5 or 6 years, you just haven't seen that kind of elite finish that you'd want to see at USC. So they're not there yet, but I think USC fans are hopeful one way or another, either with Clay Helton or with somebody else at the helm. You get the right coach and the right fit in there, you can still win at USC.
Yeah, on top of that, like when you look at the Pac-12 in general, they haven't been given so much love by the college football committee. Because like when you get there, like they have a 2 loss, the committees will be like, well, we don't want 2 losses in. Or they even when they have 1 loss, they'd be looking at like the Big 12, be like, well, Oklahoma just has a Heisman Trophy winner, so we should try to put them in to see what the Heisman Trophy candidate can do. But USC may not have that potential star, so it's like it's a love-hate relationship. But then when you get to like the college football, when you get left out, you end up playing a Big Ten opponent, let's say Ohio State in 2017, then you don't perform and it just hurts your resume, like saying, can we trust the Pac-12 in the playoff scenario?
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think there's certain programs out there that are going to get the benefit of the doubt because they've done it before. Like if Alabama did win the SEC and that year they won the title, they still made it in the playoff. You're giving them the benefit of the doubt because you know they're really good. USC is one of those programs that gets the benefit of the doubt. That year they won the Rose Bowl, they started off 1-3. I don't think you could name another team in the country. I mean, you couldn't do that in the SEC because if you start off 1-3 in the SEC, there's no way you're getting back. But the Pac-12 was down enough. They didn't even win the conference, but they still get selected to go to the Rose Bowl, even though they didn't win the division. They had beaten Colorado, who won the division, and then they go in the Rose Bowl and have an exciting win over a top 5 Penn State team. You're getting the benefit of the doubt if you're USC. So when USC's been down for the last decade or so, it's really tough on the conference in general. Oregon's shown some promise, they can get there, but they're still kind of outside looking in. They better be undefeated or you might not get in. Washington, same kind of thing. So I feel like USC is one of those teams that is going to get the benefit of the doubt. And if Oregon wants to be that elite squad and Washington wants to be the elite squad, I think you need USC to be good. Because if you're not, then it's not really proven anything for the conference. If USC is really good and Oregon wins it, it helps Oregon a lot more. So I think USC being down, it's not only hurt USC, but it's hurt the whole conference.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Ryan, I think one thing that has really hurt USC is the inflexible scheduling of college football. USC scheduled some of these games with Alabama with the intention of being an elite team by the time it was 2016 or 2017. And then as a result, in that beginning of the Rose Bowl season, you had USC playing Alabama in pretty much week 1, week 2, losing by 35 points. And all of a sudden, I'm not saying that all of those players came in with the mindset that we're going to win the national title, right? But every coach, every player out there comes in with, the aim of contending for a national championship. And when you have early blowout loss to Alabama, in which you couldn't really forecast for, it really brings down your program going forward for those next few weeks. You don't build up that momentum that some of the other programs have built up. There may be an easier early season schedule.
I think for the Pac-12, you have to do that, where if you're in the SEC, you can play a couple cupcakes early, play a cupcake later in the season, as a bye week before your big rivalry game. You can't really do that in the Pac-12. I think that part of the reason USC's had success is they do schedule those tough games. And like in the Pete Carroll era, they would win them. I mean, Matt Leinert's first game was at Auburn, and they had 3 NFL running backs and an NFL quarterback, and they shut them out. It was great. Like, that's insane. His first ever pass was a touchdown. It's pretty crazy that you could do that. But when you go out on the road and beat Auburn in your opener, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt the rest of the season, where if you went out and beat a couple of cupcakes and you're on the West Coast, you're not going to do it. Ohio State could probably do it. Alabama could probably do it. LSU, after winning a title, they could probably do it. But for the Pac-12, you got to show you can win those games. In the last couple of years, we saw both Washington and Oregon play Auburn, I believe, and they both lost those games. If they win that game, it helps the Pac-12. If they don't, then you're sort of like, okay, the Pac-12's off. And so you're kind of forced into playing those kind of games out here. But you're right. You lose that one early, it kind of takes away a lot of the momentum. But if you win it, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt along the way. And if you can run the table in the conference, you'll definitely be in the college football playoff.
Man, it just kind of shows you the razor thin margin for the Pac-12. I mean, last year, Oregon had that amazing game against Auburn. If they had managed to close that out, we don't know how the rest of the season would look. Even with the loss to ASU, they may have snuck into the college football playoffs.
Yeah, it's a razor thin margin for most of the Pac-12. For USC, they get some wiggle room, so that's what's good. So it helps the Pac-12 if USC can be good. And I know USC fans are hoping for that too.
Yeah, speaking of which, Last time we saw USC kind of get back on the national stage, it was with a promising young quarterback in Sam Darnold. And now we have Kedon Slovis to help carry the program forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Isaiah, who has some questions about Kedon's overall potential and where he could really take this program.
Yeah, thanks, Steven. Ryan, I think Kedon Slovis is a stud. I think that he's going to be when all is said and done, I think he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks to ever play at USC. I think that's just how good he is. Last year he completed 289 passes out of 392 attempts, 71.9% completion percentage, 30 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Just a fantastic freshman year for Kedon Slovis. I wanted to ask you, Kedon Slovis, he had an amazing freshman year last season. What are some traits that you like about him, and what are some weaknesses that you believe he needs to work on?
Yeah, I think you mentioned all those numbers. One of the strengths is that was all off the bench. I mean, he was not the starter going into the season. He ends up, coming in halfway through game one and is able to bounce back even with a couple injuries and still perform at a high level. He learned a brand new offense with Graham Harrell, but that relationship has been really good. Graham Harrell and Kedon Slovis. Harrell loved him. And the fact that they made him the number 2 quarterback, which everyone thought he would just be number 4. Graham Harrell knows quarterbacks. He saw something special in him, and we've all seen it now too. I mean, he had 4 games over 400 yards. He had the UCLA game, 4 different wide receivers caught 100 yards worth of passes. It's just some crazy stuff there from Slovis. And I think he's shown the poise that it takes to be a great quarterback. I think, he's got a good enough arm. I think the accuracy is there. I mean, over 71%, one of the most accurate quarterbacks we've seen, especially as a freshman. I mean, he's done some really amazing things. I think sometimes he can kind of trust, his receivers a little too much. We talked to Graham Harrell about that a little bit, where you just need to dump it off every once in a while. But he's completed such a high level. It's hard to fault him for wanting to try to, make those plays. And he does have an amazing group of wide receivers. And he was the beneficiary that, JT Daniels wasn't the year before, of having a really good college offensive system that's air raidy, but not, not like a Mike Leach air raid. They do want to run the football more. So I think it's helped to have one voice, one plan in that offensive coach's room. And that's what's presented to Slovis, and he's performing on it. JT Daniels, you had like Clay Helton doing some stuff. You had, all the different, you had T. Martin doing things. You had his quarterback coach. You had everyone kind of taking part in the offense. And there was still stuff left over from Steve Sarkisian and Lane Kiffin. And it was sort of this mess. They called it like the gumbo offense. It was a little bit of everything. I don't think that's easy on the quarterbacks. This offense is pretty easy on the quarterbacks. You can learn it in 3 days of practice. He installed the entire offense in 3 spring practices. Then they just redo it over and over again. I think that helps a young quarterback a lot, but give him a lot of credit for being able to take the reins and run with it when he was really thrust into the situation he didn't expect to be in, and then ends up performing at the highest level. And his back, the starting quarterback ends up transferring out because he played so well.
Yeah, and I think Kedon Slovis could be better than Sam Darnold. I really do. You look at the completion percentage, it's about 6 to 7% higher than Darnold had in his best year with USC.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Darnold's an NFL quarterback, but you watched him. He made things happen. He was able to escape pressure in the pocket and not just like run out of bounds for 5 yards and a first down. He would escape pressure in the pocket and make something out of a broken play and find somebody downfield, pick up a big chunk of yardage or a touchdown or something. And those are the kind of special things where you're like, all right, that's just it. That's his ability to do things like that. Where we've seen Kedon Slovis, he didn't really have a great offense to run either. So he kind of had to do everything on the fly. We haven't seen as much of that. We've seen Slovis do some of that, but he hasn't had to do as much because a lot of the stuff is just on schedule. Like they're running a competent offense. Guys are getting open and he's getting them the football. I mean, they say, Graham Harrell says like, I just want my receivers to run to grass, which basically means run and get open. And the quarterback's job is to throw it to you. He doesn't want to make it too complicated. With Sam Darnold, he had to put a Superman cape on and do things himself, where Slovis can kind of execute the offense and still perform at a high level. But as far as, we'll see how Sam does in the NFL. He's had, it's been weird with the Jets, but Slovis looks like he's a guy that could excel at that level. Having a Cliff Kingsbury kind of offense to run in the NFL, who knows? Things like that could be a lot of fun. Yeah, Kurt Warner coaching him in high school, so that certainly helps. But yeah, he's got the potential, but they're very different quarterbacks.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, Ryan. Another thing I just got to say about Slovis before we move on is, the thing I most like about him is that he's just so calm under pressure. There's nothing that phases him. I remember, I think it was the game against Notre Dame where USC was down. I believe it was 21-3. I might be wrong on that, but one of the announcers for the Notre Dame telecast was saying that he saw Kedon Slovis on the sidelines just telling his offensive linemen, telling his wide receivers, telling his tight ends that guys, it's okay. We've got this. Just stay calm and just play your game, and we're gonna battle back. And USC, they did battle back, but they unfortunately fell short. But yeah, the calm about this kid is just something that you don't really see from freshman quarterbacks.
No, you're right. And I think being a leader at the quarterback spot, people are like, oh, how strong is your arm, how accurate, whatever. But you got to be a leader. You're getting the entire team, even the defensive guys, to follow you. If you're going out there and lighting up the scoreboard, you energize the guys on defense like, hey, I know we can make a play and my guy on the offense is going to make something happen. I feel like he gives everyone confidence, and he was able to instill that, like you said, even though they were down during the Notre Dame game. I mean, if he wouldn't have got hurt in the Holiday Bowl, who knows what would have happened. They started to come back there before he ended up getting knocked out. But he's got the guys on the team. He gives them a lot of confidence, and I think that shows some really good leadership skills. For a freshman, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately USC's success is not going to necessarily be predicated on Slovis. We've seen some of the best of Slovis already, and I think that if USC does falter, it will be kind of on the defense. It will be on the other positions of weakness that USC does have. And so I want to turn it to Trevor, who has some, questions about USC's other positions and where they can improve to become a national contender again.
So for the positions that we are looking at, so if USC was to get back into the chase for the playoffs, what are some strengths that they're going into this year and some weaknesses that they need to improve upon in this upcoming year?
Yeah, I think if you're talking on the defensive side of the football, I think they fixed some of the coaching stuff on offense, and they had a lot of great players, but they brought in a really good system. And Graham Harrell's a really good coach, and you're letting these players play and put them in position to win. I think that's what you're trying to do with bringing in Todd Orlando on the defensive side of the ball. Clancy Pendergast's a longtime defensive coordinator at USC. I think he was really good with the secondary. It was a young secondary last year, and I thought they played well. But he sort of overlooked the linebackers a little bit. And USC had some really talented guys at the linebacker spot. They just seemed to be underutilized, and we didn't see the kind of pop and explosiveness you want out of a defensive front. That there's a bunch of NFL guys, I think, there too. So you're hopeful Todd Orlando comes in. He's a linebacker guy by trade. You want to see those linebackers, the Pallier, Teotes of the world, who was a 5-star kid coming out of Bishop Gorman. Like, where's he been? We want to see more of guys like that. Kanai Mauga. There's a bunch of dudes there, and Drake Jackson on the defensive line is just a force to be reckoned with. He's going to be an elite pass rusher. That young secondary last year played well. I think they're going to do. They'll be a year older this year. There's a lot of guys like a Talanoa Funga or Elijah Griffin. I think studs all around. They have plenty of talent on the defensive side of the ball. To me, it's really about on the coaching side, making it work together, making it be a defense that's not in the bottom 2/3 or whatever of the country. They're just too talented to be ranked that low and not force a lot of turnovers and things like that. So I feel like it's not necessarily about a position. They're deep on the defensive line. I like all their positions on defensive side of the ball. I think they're deep everywhere. They got a lot of guys that can play. What position are they going to be put in by these coaches? And we got to see one spring practice with these new defensive coaches because it's an entire new defensive staff. So we don't really have a good feel for you. I thought after spring we would know, but obviously with the quarantine and stuff, we don't have that. But talking to those coaches, I feel pretty confident that they're going to get more out of these players than maybe the last staff did, which they made some changes on the defensive staff last year, but it wasn't like a cohesive group anymore. It was just sort of like mixed and match. I think now Todd Orlando's got a bunch of guys that he likes on his staff, some player, a coach or two that he had at Texas, and bringing a young guy like Vic Soto for the defensive line. I think the staff's going to work together well. They got enough talent. So I think they're going to be a lot better on defense than we've saw the previous years.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Ryan,
adding that defense. Oh, sorry, Isaiah.
No, I was just going to say, Ryan, you hit on it. Like the thing that I could see hurting USC this upcoming season is the lack of spring practices for the defense to get that to learn that scheme and to practice that scheme, because when you learn a new scheme and you can't practice it on the field, it is extremely hard to go out there in the game and do your job. And I think that's what could end up hurting USC this upcoming season. I hope it doesn't hurt USC because I root for USC. But yeah, that's the one thing that I could really see biting USC this year.
Yeah, I think across college football, real quick, Trevor, sorry. Across college football,
okay.
anyone that makes a change at a coaching, at a head coaching position or a coordinator position, you're going to be a disadvantage. I love Nick Rolovich going up to Washington State. But man, you're a brand new coach. You got Carl Durrell going to Colorado. Like, you're a brand new coach. You've had like one practice or no practices with your players. That's going to be really difficult. And when you're, for Graham Harrell, he's got the same system. They know it. For the defensive guys, you're right. It's now they all have to learn this new thing, and maybe you only get a few weeks of real practice before the season. It's going to be a lot more difficult. Anyone that brought back their coordinators and their coach, probably in a much better spot than the other programs that have new turnover there.
Yep.
Yeah, and like what you said for defense, getting that linebacker core going, that's like a crucial position on that football field, because that is like determining that 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 4 situation. If you can bring those linebackers up to create pressure and like stop the run, or if it's a deep 3rd and 7, that linebacker core can make some uneasy pressure on the quarterback to make him throw awkward throws so your D-backs can pick off, get a nice pick six. So once USC can develop that, I think they can probably run the entire conference, get in the college football playoffs, and make a statement saying the Pac-12 is here and we're going to be here year in and year out.
Yeah. Watch for Solomon Tuilapupu, who had a foot injury out of high school, highly ranked kid out of Mater Dei, just big, strong, fast. He practiced a couple of times, but every time we'd see him a little bit and then he would kind of get hurt and we wouldn't see him again. If he's full, go this year, he's going to be a fun one to watch. So we just haven't seen him much because of the injuries, but if he's back, he's going to be another one of those studs at USC for the linebacker spot.
All right, let's get into recruiting with Trevor.
So obviously earlier we did talk a little bit about recruiting, but how does USC need to, compete against Ohio State, Alabama, LSUs of the world and trying to recruit top talent like 5-star recruits to come to USC to play versus going to schools that are in the college football playoffs almost every year?
Yeah, that's one of the bigger failures from last year was that recruiting class. And they had Bryce Young, 5-star quarterback, ends up decommitting and going to Alabama. And if you remember, you guys are all young, but in the mid 90s, late 90s, the Florida States, the Ohio State, they would come, Texas would come to California and take some of their best recruits. Miami was a huge recruiting power. They would go up to like De La Salle High School or a bunch of the ones in Southern California, and some of the top players would end up leaving. And the big thing Pete Carroll did was make it cool to stay on the West Coast. And he started getting guys like Sean Cody to stay in Southern California, starts recruiting at a high level. He brings in big recruiters like Ed Orgeron and stuff. And they really sold what USC could be. And then when they started winning, then they were getting the guys from across the country. So the first thing he did was keep a fence around California. And once USC, went 5-7 and just started to look, Clay Elton's on the hot seat, USC lost its luster, and then it's open game. Clemson can come in, Alabama come in, Texas, Ohio State, all those programs can come in and steal away the best players in California. And now you have to try to get back to holding that off. Oregon's been doing an amazing job recruiting California and Southern California. Even losing Dante Williams, they're one of their best recruiters. They've done a really good job, especially getting linemen. And that's one area I think USC still needs to improve on. They got better this class, 2021. We'll see. There's a lot more commitments now than we normally see at this time of year. But it's a really good class for USC, number 7 or whatever in the country right now. And they were up to, I think, number 4. But Oregon's recruiting really well. They're a top 5 type of program. So they still got to hold off Oregon. But at least they're now getting back, Trevor, to what the normal DNA of USC recruiting is, which they got away from it the last couple of years. But they got to do that and then even take it to another level by recruiting nationally. They're getting a bunch of guys out of Texas, but mostly because they hired a bunch of Texas assistants. I think at this point, if you can show like, hey, we're going to win the Pac-12 this year, go forward. And, if they have a playoff, make a run to the playoff or whatever, I think that opens the door. But if you're going 8-4 or 7-5, it's just, you're not going to be able to recruit nationally like you were able to before. So there's a I think they're getting back there, Trevor, but you need to go that next level by being an elite team, not losing 3, 4, 5 games a year, like maybe losing 1 or 2, then getting those national guys, not just the Southern California guys, but the national guys as well.
Speaking
I
of
agree
losing
with you on that.
speaking of
Stephen.
losing 3, 4, or 5 games, Isaiah here really faults Clay Helton for contributing to some of USC's struggles. So I'm going to go to Isaiah, and he has some questions about that coaching position and Clay Helton's job security.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. We addressed this a little bit earlier, but Ryan, I'm going to be brutally honest with you. I'm not the biggest fan of Clay Helton. I think, he should have been gone years ago. He has tons of great talent to work with every season, and yet somehow can't get the team to the college football playoffs, which I believe is a standard for USC fans each and every year. And also, for me, his in-game management leaves a lot to be desired. Why do you believe that the USC administration has been unwilling to get rid of Clay Helton despite overwhelming support from the fans to get rid of him, and also the mediocre results that he's put up? And what do you believe Clay Helton has to do to win back the support of the USC fan base?
Yeah, it's been tough. The fans are certainly not on Clay Helton's side. He's been, securely on the hot seat the last couple of years. Going 5-7 at USC, the last guy to do that was Paul Hackett. You can't allow things like that to happen, especially when you look at his roster compared to the people who are playing. I mean, the numbers are right. I mean, you can't really defend what Clay Helton's record has been. They've had some good years, but losing the Holiday Bowl like they did last year, getting blown up by Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, going 5-7, like those are inexcusable things. When you have this talent advantage, you can't let that happen. The problem for USC fans, the problem for the USC football program, which ended up being to the benefit of Clay Helton, is they've had such poor leadership in the athletic department, starting with Pat Hayden, who was All-American at USC, a Rhodes Scholar, just a terrible athletic director. It's making awful decisions. And Lynn Swann, we could never even talk to Lynn Swann. He's a super stud at USC, NFL Hall of Famer, was not a very good athletic director. He was plucked out of obscurity. So USC was hiring people that were just big names and not people that were good at their jobs. And I think in this kind of environment, you're managing a $120 million budget. It's great that he was an awesome football player at USC, but he had never been an athletic, administrator or even thought about it. You're going to bring guys like Pat Hayden and Lynn Swann in to do a job that's just way over their head. And I feel like that's where the shortcomings came from. Lynn Swann, Pat Hayden hired Clay Helton permanently before going into, getting blown out by Stanford in the championship game. And, things like that. You're like, why did you didn't really need to do that. You hire a guy that has no experience as a head coach to run your program, mainly because he was around and he was part of the football team. Like, okay, we'll keep him around. Instead of going out and finding the best guy who's really good at their job, they hired the familiar person. I think that's part of USC's problem. And then Lynn Swann gives them an extension for like 5 years and fully guaranteed. Just inexcusable things that you just shouldn't do if you're going to be running an athletic department like USC. So I think Clay Helton was the beneficiary of all that. And then when Mike Bone comes in, who's been a real athletic director, the first time they've hired someone that was an actual athletic director since like 1984. But the problem was he had to make a decision on Clay Helton within like 3 weeks. And there was a lot of financial reasons not to fire Clay Helton at the time. So to me, I think he's going to be pretty good, but his hands were, to my point, his hands were tied as far as trying to get rid of Clay Helton when he did. Now with the pandemic, who knows what's going to go on there. So a lot of it to me, guys, is just USC had poor leadership at the top. And that sort of set this up for you get a coach that's not been successful, but you're not really in a position to fire him anymore because of all the other failures that not just the athletic department, but the university as a whole has made over the years. So I think they're trying to get it fixed with Carol Folt, the president, and Mike Bone, the athletic director. But really, guys, it's just been poor leadership at the top. And USC's been so good, it can still kind of run itself. That ran its course. Once you go 5-7, all bets are off. Now you got to really make good decisions and try to fix things. And that's what they want Mike Bone to be able to come in and do.
Yeah, Ryan, don't even get me started on Pat Hayden. Him choosing Ed Orgeron. I mean, yeah, him choosing to not retain Ed Orgeron after Ed Orgeron was magnificent with USC when he was the interim head coach, and going with Steve Sarkisian, I think is absolutely ridiculous. And then Lynn Swann, that extension you talked about, yeah, I agree with you. That was totally ridiculous because there was no one else that was going to give Clay Helton the amount of money and years that he wanted. And I feel bad for Carol Folt and Mike Bowen because USC fans, they've just got this really high standard. And if you look on their Twitter page every day, it's like a tweet about it's about fire Helton or resign or something like that. So I really hope that USC turns it around. But yeah, I'm going to go over to Steven and Trevor. They've got a question on the Pac-12.
Let's wrap it up with Trevor's question about Pac-12 games for
All
this
right.
season.
My final question is, what conference games are you going to be excited for this year? The thrillers, the heartbreaks that you could see this season.
Yes, so we know it's going to be conference only. I think USC playing at Oregon is a big one. I mean, Oregon's going to be the favorite in the North. USC is going to be the favorite in the South. So I think that's a really huge one. But one you want to watch out for is Cal. I love, the way Cal's been able to play defense the last couple of years. Tim DeRuyter, I covered a little bit when he was at Fresno State. I think he's a really good defensive coach. But Chase Garber is their quarterback. When he was in last year, Cal was winning. When he was out, they were losing. And I feel like they're a team that could make a run at the North. And they're someone that brings their quarterback back. There's a lot of quarterbacks being replaced across the Pac-12. You love the way Utah's been able to play, but man, they lost so much production. I like picking Utah. They won the division the last 2 years, but they lose so much and USC brings so much back. It's tough to overlook them. I like Arizona State as well a little bit. So like the Utah Arizona State game, Utah USC, Arizona State USC, that kind of triangle, I think those are all going to be interesting. And even with Jimmy Lake in the North, I feel like he's going to keep that rolling, similar to what David Shaw did with Jim Harbaugh rolling at Stanford. I think Jimmy Lake can kind of keep it going there, but he's got a defensive focus, and they've just sort of dropped off on defense a little bit. And I feel like they're going to open up the offense a little bit more. Washington can make a run. I think the North is really strong, and Oregon State's on the rise. Washington State's going to be fun with Nick Rolovich, but watch out for Cal. I think they're going to be one of those kind of teams to really watch for. I think Stanford's just probably going to keep falling off. They were 4-8 last year, didn't make any changes to the coaching staff. I think that's a real problem. But the triangle of games, USC, Arizona State, and Utah in the South, and then like Washington, Oregon, and Cal in the North. Watch those matchups. I think those are going to probably be the most fun.
All right.
Yeah, I want to thank Ryan so much for coming on. And for certain, USC is going to need to win those 2 games against Utah and Arizona State. It's going to be pivotal in any potential conference championship or playoff bid for them. I wish USC the best of luck going forward, and Ryan, you as well. It was a fun conversation. Really love you joining us. And just for everyone watching out there, you can follow Ryan's website at uscfootball.com. I have the URL attached in the description as well. And take care.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on, guys. You all stay safe and cross your fingers. We do get college football.
For sure.
All right. I will leave you guys off with some USC fight song music.